now we hem that edge. Sorry for the overexposure, I can't get the lighting right. We hem or serge the edge that we just cut when we were trimming off our hem. This is going to take a while, so pop in an audiobook or some tunes and relax and enjoy the process. Alright, so that's the hem all serged, and then now it's time to roll it and iron it and then blind hem. So remember that your hem is a circle, and so you're going to have the largest diameter is going to be towards the end, and this is going to be a narrower diameter, and so sometimes you'll have issues putting this amount of fabric into the smaller diameter. So the smaller, the narrower your hem that you roll, the easier it is going to be to accommodate all that fabric and shifting. Thankfully we have a large circumference to work with, and so it's easy to mush that fabric in and around, just kind of pulling in, messing with the tension. So what I like to do is I'm going to iron in a 1/2 inch turn, turning the serged edge up, and then once that's all done all the way around the entire thing, ironed in nice and flat, then I'm going to roll it, and I'm going to do about a 1/2 inch, or no, about an inch turn, and then that way I have an inch in my hem, and that meets with where I kind of cut everything, and it keeps it nice and narrow, so it's not going to have a lot of fabric that we need to adjust. So onto the ironing board and more audiobooks. So when ironing the hem, one trick I like to do is, because you have so much fabric weight hanging here, and most ironing boards are not big enough. Some people have the luxury of those enormous ironing boards, and I'm ever so jealous, and someday maybe. But anyway, so I've gone ahead and done that first roll of rolling the serged edge up by about a 1/2 inch. And so now I'm on to my next fold, which is a 1/2 inch or an inch additional rolled up to make my total hem. And one of the tricks, so because we have so much extra fabric, I use my body to pin a lot of the fabric to de-weight the hem that I'm ironing, the portion of the hem that I'm ironing, by leaning my body up against the ironing board. And then what I do is, for the portion that is already here and started and ironed up that additional inch, I go ahead and lay the iron on here. It's not going to burn, it's fine. And then I come over and then I use marking points, like this here is my seam, and so I'm going to roll up an inch on the seam, and then using the pressure I'm just going to gently pull and iron. And what that does is it automatically eases the curve into what we are ironing. Let me show you again here. I think my arm was in the way. So over to the side here, so I pin the additional, I de-weight it by pinning the fabric to the board with my body. I have the iron hanging out over here, and then I take a mark and I roll up that inch, and then I pull it gently. This is a bigger curve, so I'm gonna decrease how much I'm working with here. So I fold up an inch to make sure that I'm gonna stay true, and then I just gently pull. I just gently pull the fabric, and what happens is that eases, yes, I know you're grumpy, that eases that outer diameter into the smaller diameter. And then you iron it in place. And then this makes sewing so much easier because everything is already in place. So pinned, de-weighted the fabric, stick the iron down, figure out where my next inch roll is going to be, make that inch roll, and then gently pull to ease the outer diameter to the new. And then sometimes you might get just a little bit much, but you can just go in and readjust that. So this really speeds up the process, both from an ironing perspective, yes, I know, grumpy iron, and then also it sets you up brilliantly for the next sewing step. And now it's time to sew the hem. I am an avid fan of using a blind hem stitch on my hems. Some people like to use a running stitch. I find that kind of locks it down. I like the flexibility and also the subtlety that a blind hem stitch or stretch blind hem stitch brings. So I'm sure there's some YouTube videos out there that will show up much better than all this dark fabric here. But again, I don't use pens. This is just me. Pens are great if you want. But I just keep a point to make sure that I'm always checking in at some sort of location point, like here on this seam, just to make sure that the seam on the hem is lining up still with the seam. Because again, this can stretch. Thankfully, the blind hem stitch is one where the feed dogs help out, because you are going to be putting the longer section onto the bottom. So kind of that lower outer diameter is going to be on the bottom, which makes it easier to feed into the upper diameter. And so we're just gonna sew away, and then onto the ironing. Right, and now we just need to iron flat the blind hem. And so so it went in through the machine folded this way, and so when we open it up, it can have quite a significant crease. And so I kind of do an initial finger pressing just to kind of make sure I don't have any large areas where I really got off track and picked up way too much fabric to include into here. And then at that point, once I kind of have it a little QC going on and things started using my fingers, I come back with the iron and I just iron that flat, and poof, we have a hem that looks like it's been hand stitched on the outside. I just adore the blind hem stitch. It's so much fun. And yep, so that's what it looks like on the inside, and that's what it looks like on the outside. Magic of the blind hem stitch. Love this thing.